All right, so I thought we'd do a little Texas two-step this morning. You've heard the phrase all the time, one step forward and, two steps backward, because that's a lot of times how people feel in things that are important, what they're trying to accomplish, that there's this resistance and everything doesn't go the way we want it to. And that was one of the reasons we decided this year to do this series called Make Love Last, because there is a direction to love and there is a purpose for it, and the Bible speaks very clearly about this. And so, the first week we talked about how you can make your love relationships last by this lasting expression that you can give. Does anybody remember what that was? You show what? Gratitude. You show gratefulness to someone and you express it. In fact, I still will tell you, I think it's most important that at times, especially with the people that you really love, that you don't just say how grateful you are, you actually write it down, because they get a chance to keep it with them and remember it and to read it, and then you get a chance sometimes to go back and read it and say, oh, that's right. I forgot all about how much this person meant to me and what they had done for me and why I was so grateful for them. And then last week we talked about perpetuating the mess, because life can really be a mess in a lot of ways. And whenever humanity, mankind, when the world tries to figure it out and sort of grasp concepts independent of God and say, we're going to put this into practice, but we don't need a God to do it, what always happens is they make a mess of it. And it just, it's one of those things that then the next generation does the same thing, makes a mess and makes a mess. And maybe, we talked about this, maybe God allows that so that we would make a conscious effort to look to God instead and say, God, you designed us this way. You're the one that made us. You're the one that you understand us. You planned where our life should go. So maybe if we look to you, maybe you could teach us something about love that would help us build love and find a love that lasts in our lives, rather than just continuing the messy cycle that we always find ourselves in. And it really brings us to this point, because this is a passage, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, often called the love chapter, that Paul writes about, but Paul writes about it in the middle of a big mess. Corinth was kind of the place to be in the Greek culture and then in the Roman culture. It was a prosperous place, many, many, many gods that they worshiped, many temples. They spent a lot of money on this. And the Corinthians, even as a church, when you read 1st, 2 Corinthians, two really long books, what you discover is the Corinthians, as human beings, just like us, were very much self-indulgent. They were self-indulgent. They were really struggling with that. Life was about them, and they had a difficult time not looking at life as being about them, because that was the culture around them. That's how they learned life and how they grew up. And then Paul will challenge them, and he will say, but that's not what you learned about life. You learned that life came from God, and that God sent His Son Jesus to rescue you. And God gives us a new spirit to teach us a different way. So just as you were given life in a new way, don't go back to your old way. Learn to love and to live in a totally different way. And so as he's addressing the issues, the struggles, and their biggest struggle in 1 Corinthians, right before 1 Corinthians 13, is they were looking at the gifts of God and those things and thinking that's the most important thing. And he says, no, that's not the most important thing. And so what he wants to do is he wants to show them what he calls the better way, the better way. And it's going to involve what I call two steps to the better way. We'll get to them in a minute, but just to let you know, these are two steps that whenever I counsel couples and in marriage struggles, these are the two steps that I talk about, two things that you can do more than anything else. If you can do these two things, if you will work on these two things, that you can make your love grow and you can cause your love to last. And if you don't want to do these two things, if you decide I'm not going to do this, then we probably need to go to someone else to help you out, because it's not going to grow and you're not going to make it work. And let me be straight up with you. It's not natural for a person to do these two things. It goes against everything that self-centered wise, selfish wise, as humanity, sinful, fallen humanity, everything in our being that says, no, do this instead. But as Paul will say, but this is the better way. This is the way that works. This is the way that will get you where you want to go in life down the road to a lasting love relationship if you can just apply these two things. It's one of the things I thought about this morning. Maybe this is why when Jesus talks about giving life, that he talks about giving eternal life, because he's trying to give you something that's going to last, right? You know, it's not just the fact that you don't ever die. It's a totally different quality of the life that you're going to live. So Paul, he's going to try to teach them a better way. And this is what it says in the very last verse, the very last half verse in chapter number 12, because remember, these are letters. There were no chapters and verses. We just put those in there. But this is what it says, and those who broke it up put this in the very last verse. In fact, here it is. This is 1 Corinthians 12, verse 31. It says, but now, let me show you, say this with me, a way of life that is what? Yeah. It's going to be much better than the way you've been living your life. This is going to be the best way that you can possibly live your life if you will catch this and you will understand this. And so you go into the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians. Let me read the first three verses for you really quickly, because what Paul's going to do is he's going to look at their culture and he's going to draw this comparison to things that they see, that they know, that they think are really important. And he's not saying that they aren't important. He's just going to look at those and say, but if you miss these steps, if you miss this, none of this is important. Here's what he says. He said, if I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, and they were totally carried away with the idea that God would give them the ability to speak other languages or speak in the languages of angels. And the Corinthians were just really caught up with this. So he is targeting exactly where they're living and exactly the things that are causing such anger and struggles and divisions among them. He says, but if I didn't love others, if I could do this and I didn't love others, he said, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. So, in their temples and their worship, they didn't have all the electronic instruments and things that we use. So, they had other things. They had big brass gongs and things that they could make noise. And it would be, very understandable that worshiping their God, because they worshiped a huge number of gods, and the God that you decided, to focus on, that the temple you went to was the biggest temple. It was the best temple. It was the noisiest, with the gongs temple, because that showed just how powerful your God was. Think about it if you look at culture. This is what you see looking back in culture. When civilizations or kings or emperors or groups of people wanted to show how important they were, what did they do in the past? They built big buildings. And the bigger the building, the more powerful you were. And as you built a big, building, whether a giant pyramid, or the Romans would later build these magnificent stone archways, and they would carve all their, conquerings and the importance of who they were on them, so that when visitors would come in, they would just be blown away, going, wow. Just like, these must be powerful people. These must be really important people. Why wouldn't you, wouldn't you want to be a part of who they are? Because look at this that they have built. And listen, here's one of the really interesting things about archaeology today. As we have studied other lands and understood other civilizations, this didn't just happen with one culture. This is common with all cultures. In fact, pyramids and pyramid types of structures are common in almost every major civilization on the earth. They look a little bit different. Some are made out of stone, some are made out of earth. Even, I was watching something the other day, even the American Indians built enormous pyramid types of structures, step types of structures. In the United States, they're just earthen. They weren't made out of stone, so you just look at it as a giant hill, but then they've realized this is totally man-made. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? Because if you look at the earth, which we did not form, right? We're all in agreement with that. We didn't make the earth. We didn't create it. And you go and you look at the earth and you look at the enormous rivers, the oceans, Go look at the mountains. Go look at the Grand Canyon, What's more magnificent? A building that we have built, go downtown Houston or the Grand Canyon. What's more breathtaking? You ever been to the Grand Canyon? Nothing can compare. I mean, it would just blow you away. And yet we don't ascribe as much value to those things. Why? Because we didn't build them. We ascribe value to the things that we built that are about us, that show our importance, that make us people that we want other people to come back and say, oh, those people must have really had it together because look at what they built. Even if it was cruel to build it, even if it cost a fortune, even if it cost a lot of lives to build it, it's still, we are enamored with it. It's absolutely true. Even in Jesus' day, even in Paul's day, this was true in Jerusalem because Herod, in order to make himself popular, in order to be in good standing with the people, because he occupied a position that he was not actually rightly allowed to have, but he had cut his deals with Rome, and so he comes in and he builds a temple in Jerusalem. It's where Solomon's temple was built, but Herod builds the largest, the most magnificent temple that had ever been built. It was one of the wonders of the world in his day. People traveled from everywhere, dignitaries, heads of state, to see this enormous temple that was built there in Jerusalem. I know you think, well, wow, I never saw it, because it didn't last very long. Because the Romans destroyed it in 70 AD, not long after Paul writes to the Corinthians. They come back and they destroy it, because whenever you build monuments to yourself to show how powerful you are, which is what Herod did, guess what happens when the next civilization or the next, big empire takes over? They tear down the monuments that you build to yourself so that they can use the stone to build monuments to themselves. And that's exactly what they did. It didn't last. It just becomes a footnote somewhere in history, because it just wasn't as important to them. So Paul is saying, listen, I understand. I know why you would think this way. I know why you would look at it this way. This is the human way to look at it. But if you don't understand the power of love itself, and if you don't understand how to get there and how to build something that doesn't go away, that doesn't get torn down, but instead just lasts, he said, the truth is you're building something that doesn't really matter. In fact, look at his next, he sort of goes from one observation to a more powerful observation and to a more powerful observation, because he goes looking at the temples around them. And then he says in verse number 2, he says, if I had the gift of prophecy, right? If I could tell the future, if I understood all of God's secret plans, and if I possessed all knowledge, I mean, how many people wouldn't say, oh, wow, I mean, that's got to be the most powerful thing that anyone could ever have. Your life would be set up. You could never fail. Everything would go your way. He said, but if I had such faith that I could move mountains, but didn't love others, what does he say? I would be nothing. I would be nothing. I mean, these are bold statements that he is making to them. And then the third one, he says, if I gave everything I have to the poor. So he's really now talking about a sacrificial life, a giving up of yourself for something bigger than yourself. If I gave everything I had to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I became a martyr. He said, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained how much? Nothing. Not a thing. Nothing would have been gained. And what he's talking about, there's nothing that would have been done then that would bring any kind of lasting change, that would make any difference going forward. In Greek language, there are different words for love. You've probably heard this before. But what you may not understand or you may not know is in the Greek culture, and then now in this Romanized culture that they lived in, the love that was talked about is not the love that he is talking about. This is where we get the word in the Greek agape. You've heard the word agape before? Agape is a very common word in the Greek, but it was very rarely written about. You just didn't see people talk about agape because it just wasn't important to them, that type of love. What they did talk about was sensual love, romantic love, right? You know, the things that love songs are. I heard it in a love song. That's the kind of love they're talking about. They weren't talking about agape. Just like I was listening early this morning, I got up too early, so I turned it on, and they were selling, B.J. Thomas was on some station, and he was selling love songs of the 70s. You ever seen B.J. say, oh yeah. And it's the B.J. now. So I was like, oh, he's older than I am. And, but he still sings better than I do. And he was selling the love songs of the 70s. As I listened to him as they went through all these love songs that, I remember, and I was like, oh, yeah, here's what I noticed. Every one of them is about sensual love. Every one of them is about romantic love. Every single one of them. As if that's the ultimate. If you get there, man, you have achieved, you have arrived. That's the only love that matters. And the Greek culture, just like the Roman culture, was totally obsessed with this idea of love. Listen, let's be honest, we get that way also. And somehow we think that's the kind of love that will last. And then you spend your life trying to make that kind of love last, and you end up being very frustrated because it doesn't last, and you kind of burn out on that kind of love, and then you just kind of give up on love. And then there are a lot of songs written about that also. I was listening to the study of some celebrities who have died of drug overdoses. Let me tell you why this applies, and it really does here. One of the things that happens when you get into certain drugs is those drugs, chemically, they stimulate parts of the brain that signal the release of things that make you feel good. And they call them the pleasure centers of your life, the feel-good parts of your body. And when you feel good, certain chemicals are released. The biggest one that most people know about is dopamine. That should tell you something. So dopamine is released. It makes you feel good, but the problem with chemicals, and especially with some of the most powerful ones that have come out, crystal meth and things like that, is they cause the body to release dopamine, and then you can never, ever get that sensation back, not to that extent, ever again. And so what do? You take more of it, and you take more of it, and you take more of it, and you take more of it. And you eventually burn out, and they were using this because they were talking about how celebrities do this, and eventually they overdose and they die because you're trying to get some sort of feeling that you cannot get anymore because the body has lost the ability to produce, and it's already given up all of the chemicals that cause you to feel good, and it can't recover, it can't catch up, and so you're just kind of lost. This was really interesting. One of the forensic doctors was saying, as he talked about other things that cause the same release, one of the things he mentioned was sensuality and sensual love. And he says it's the same problem. If you chase it, and you chase it, and you chase it, you burn out because your body can't keep up. It was never designed to keep up. And you get frustrated, and then you go look for, a bigger dose over here, or a bigger dose over here, or a bigger dose over here, and you just live your life frustrated because that kind of love, that kind of idea of love needs to be placed within boundaries. It needs to be protected so that it doesn't burn out, and so that it is not something that, it's abused, and then it loses its effect, and it causes you to do really crazy and dumb things, and a lot of times cost you the kind of love that you're really looking for, the kind of love that really matters, and it's the kind of love that he talks about here. Agape. Here's what's really interesting. The Bible never speaks of eros in the Bible, ever. I know that you think that maybe it does, but it actually doesn't. And the reason is because there is a greater kind of love that the Bible speaks of, agape love, which is very much foundational to life, very much foundational to you surviving and moving forward and you feeling hope and feeling like there's a future. Agape love is the core and is the foundation for that, and it really pits itself against the other kinds of love. If you think those are the ultimate kinds of love, you find out that no, it's actually agape. And that's what Paul's talking about. He's talking about the same kind of love that Jesus taught his disciples, the same kind of love that God revealed to us through his Son, Jesus Christ, the same kind of love that lasts, the same kind of love that really matters. Here's what was interesting. I'm going to quote in a few minutes from Carl Menninger, who was a famous psychiatrist of the past century, very influential psychiatrist, and it was one of the things that I really like about Manager when he talks about love in our lives and how love lasts. He actually talks about this same kind of love and its preeminence in our life and the necessity for it in our life, as opposed to the other kind of love that we actually tend to chase. And Manager, even just from his studies, I don't know what his faith was, to be honest with you, but just from his study and his observation, said it's that kind of love that life is actually built on. He says it's that kind of love that actually brings meaning and satisfaction to people's lives. In fact, he said this about himself and other psychiatrists. He says it's not as important what a psychiatrist, his techniques, and his science. What is more important is who or what a psychiatrist is on the inside, because that's the part that connects and changes a patient's life. Interesting, isn't it? A noted, studied, authored psychiatrist would come to such a simple explanation. Something that most of us would look at and would say, well, yeah, we all know that. I mean, but how can that be the thing that changes life? And that's the remarkable thing about it. It's so simple, it's so straightforward that we tend to think, no, there's got to be something more emotional, something more over the top out there that we're looking for. And actually, it's that causes us to miss what we're really looking for. So here's his description of love. He says in verse number 4, I love this part. He says, love is what? Love is patient, love is kind. 2 steps. And these are not feelings that he's talking about. He's not saying something, if you're in love, you feel patient. You feel, when you fall in love, there's no doubt. When you fall in love, you do feel patient and kind. But let's be honest, does that last? No, it doesn't last. You get over that, and now all of a sudden, patience and kindness is something that you have to decide to do. You have to decide to give that to the other person. And what he's saying is, but that's actually agape. That's the core. That's the foundation. That's the kind of love that everything else, including romance, must be built upon. If it's not, it won't last, because this is the only kind of love that's going to last. Love is patient and love is kind. I do this with couples all the time. When they're in trouble, they're struggling, I always ask this one thing. I say, can you make a commitment? Can you say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make an effort. I'm going to work hard with my wife or with my husband. I'm going to work hard at being patient with them. I'm going to try as best I can to show kindness to them, rather than expressing, frustration or anger, which frustration is just kind of a low-grade anger anyway. And, rather than expressing those things, I'm going to purposely decide to show patience. Listen, you can do this with your kids. I know it's hard, but you can do this with your kids. Kids, you can do it with your parents. I'm going to show patience. I'm going to be kind to them, even when I don't feel like being kind. I may feel like I'm hurt or I'm angry, but I'm going to be kind to them also. This is why Manager says this. I love this phrase. He says, Carl Manager would say this. He says, love is not something you fall into. He says, love is something you have to grow into. He's right. You have to grow up and you have to grow into it and say, listen, this is the way I should act if I want this love to last. If I want it to have, some staying power, then this is what I have to learn about what love really is and what love really does. And the next descriptions, I know that these are all negative, and most people would look at these and say, well, these are further descriptions. So here's my take on this. I don't think they are. I think then what Paul does is he goes into the opposite, but he says, here's what it's not, and he's describing the things that we have a tendency to do. This is how we tend to act. And it's actually, Paul is saying, this is not love, though. You don't want to do this, and which is why he describes them in the negative. See if you agree. Here's what he says next. He says, love is not, say this one with me, love is not what? Because see, jealousy just destroys the relationship. Jealousy puts the other person at odds that they're getting something that I want. He says, not jealous. It's not boastful. No, because boastfulness just destroys patience, and kindness. Boastfulness all of a sudden becomes, again, about me, what I want, who I am. It's not proud. And he's talking about a real arrogant, stubborn pride that takes us away from the person that we love and really is all about us. We won't bend, we won't give in, we hold to our guns, even if it means separating ourselves from the person that we love. And he says that love is not, I like this one, don't you? It's not the R word. What is it? It's not rude. No, love's not rude. You may feel like being rude at times. Sometimes you feel like, well, someone's been rude to me and you want to give back what they gave to you. But love doesn't do that. Love says, no, well, let me be patient. Let me be kind with this person. Why? Because I love this person. Because I want to build this loving relationship. And these are the things that feed the loving relationship. These are the things that cause them to grow. You know what they really do? When you don't act rude to another person, instead you show patience and kindness, you know what it says? I care about you. I care about this relationship. I care about our love for one another. So even though I feel this, and I may feel justified in being rude, I choose to be patient and kind to you because I know that's what will cause this relationship to grow. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't situations where it's different as you're walking around the world. This is talking about love relationships, building a love relationship with someone. And if you're going to build it, you have to treat them different than the way you would normally just live or act or function in the world. And then what happens is it becomes a part of who you are. You become changed. You become transformed by doing this. Listen to this. He says, love does not demand its own way. Yeah, that's the opposite of being patient and kind. He says, love is not irritable. Oh, man, that irritates me just hearing that. Doesn't it you? I mean, just... Man, he's not talking about a feeling. He's talking about acting out an irritation. Sure, we get irritable. Sure, there are times we don't feel, like being kind, but we know we have learned, we have grown into love, knowing that this is what will build the relationship. He goes on to say, it keeps no record of being wronged. Whoa, that's hard, isn't it? Because we have a great mind and a great ability to hang on to the things that we feel we were wronged in and to hold those there until the right time to bring out those cards and to play those in order to justify behavior that otherwise there's no way that we could justify. He says, love does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. I thought a lot about this one because this is one of those struggles that we really have in life. Our tendency, the human tendency, the self-centered tendency is to say, listen, it may not be true, but it fits what I want. And so our tendency is to overlook the truth when that doesn't fit what we want, or to bend the truth when bending the truth would help us justify ourselves or get what we want. And we walk away from the truth so many times thinking that you can live that way. And if you read the Bible and you understand who God is, you look at who God is, what's going to be eternal, you look at who Jesus Christ is, here's what you understand. God sent Jesus Christ into the world to be truth and grace combined. Truth and compassion combined. Always truth and mercy combined. Truth is never taken out of the equation. It cannot be. Because if it's not true, it will not last. If it is not true, it cannot last. If it is a lie, it will eventually fall. It will fail. It will eventually be exposed. And that's because of who God Himself is. So when Jesus comes, Jesus is truth and compassion, truth and grace, truth and mercy toward us both, which we look at and we say, can that really happen? It can, but not without a price, right? So that means at times you have to give up what you think, but it would really be in my favor if it went this way. But here's the problem. It's not true. And if I just speak the truth, or I just live the truth, or I hold to the truth, there's a better chance that I can build something that's meaningful and that lasts in life. My wife, she's been watching some original things on Netflix. I'll probably get in trouble by telling you that, but she's watched one. You remember I think it was a book, what, All Creatures Great and Small? My sister's a vet, so I remember that book growing up, and it's been made into a new series, and one of the scenes that kind of grabbed me out of this series is there's this guy, he loves this girl. I mean, he is in love with her. She is part of a family that raises cattle in Scotland, and so he wants to help her, and he wants her to love him, and so they have this big bull, and of course, bulls, are made, as far as cattle are concerned, they have a function and a reason, and so they're going to sell this bull to someone and they're going to get a lot of money for it. But the vet has recognized that there's something wrong with the bull, and this guy knows it. He knows there's something wrong. If we sell this bull, we are selling a faulty product, is kind of the way to say it. I guess the best way to say it. And as they're there for the sale, they ask the vet, well, have you checked that? And he goes, and he knows, man, this guy will be very upset because he's told him, don't tell the truth. But the family does not know, and the family's standing there proud of their sale and their bull, and the vet goes, well, and he tells the truth. And of course, the guy who said, don't tell the truth because I love the girl that's in the family, and this really messes things up because she looks at him and she is furious with him. And the sale does not go through. They lose the sale. So here's the question. What is she really going to be upset about? You know what she does? It's great in the book. I mean, it's such a good book practically. She goes to him, she says, do you not understand that my family's reputation and our reputation as a farm and what we do is the most important thing to who we are? And even though that sale might have gone through, if it had not been revealed and you knew it, we would have been ruined long term because of it, because they knew we sold them a product, a bull, that there was something wrong with, and they would have said, and they knew about it. See, that's life. If you want something that lasts, it has to be built on truth, doesn't it? And our struggle is, okay, but if I'm going to build it on truth, how do I build it on compassion? How do I build it on caring? It can be done. But there will be some painful times, it's saying, yeah, but that's not true. Or here's what the truth is. But what you do is you build this really, really, really important thing that love has to have. You build trust. That even when it's something that I don't want to tell you, I still told you the truth, so I know this is a person that I can trust. And if you don't do that, eventually, eventually, it will catch up. And then the pain is worse, and the damage is worse, and it's more difficult to recover from that. So I think it's why he goes and he adds this last part in verse number 7. He says, love never gives up. Yeah, because it's built on something that's going to last. He says, love never loses faith. Exactly. We are future oriented. And to do that, we are building it on compassion and caring, and we're building it on being, patient and kind and truth. He says it is always hopeful and it endures through every circumstances. Quickly, here's what he says. Prophecy and speaking in unknown languages and special knowledge will become useless. It'll go away. But love will last forever. Now our knowledge is partial and incomplete, and even the gift of prophecy reveals only part of the whole picture. He says, but when full understanding comes, these partial things will become useless. And he gives another illustration. He says, look, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child does. A child, much more just short term in their reasoning and understanding. He said, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now we see things imperfectly, as in a cloudy mirror. Then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete. But then I will know everything completely, just as God who now knows me completely. 3 things will last forever. He says faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is what? Yeah, he says it's love. A couple of quotes I put in here from Carl Menninger that I thought you would enjoy. He writes, love cures people. This is an eminent psychiatrist. He says, both the ones who give it and the ones who receive it. Love cures people. He also said, love is a medicine for the sickness of the world. Isn't that great? That's just from his experience, just from his counseling and his research. Love is a medicine for the sickness of the world. I put 6 things in your outline, just kind of observations looking at this. I thought, here's what love is. Love is when you give what you wish others would give you, right? It's kind of the golden rule, isn't it? I wish this is what someone would how they would treat me. I wish they would be patient with me. I wish they would be kind with me. I wish they would be truthful with me, but truthful in a way that I know that they care, that it's not just truth used as a weapon or used to injure. It's not like a drive-by shooting, boom, and I'm gone because I don't care anything about you, that they use truth in a way that's loving and caring. I thought this about love. Anyone can do this. This is something anyone can learn to be patient and kind. It's work, it's hard, but anyone can do this. And the cool thing about it is everyone responds to this kind of love. They do. It makes a difference. It may take time for it to make a change, but everyone can do this, and everyone is affected by this kind of love in someone's life. It takes no special skills, but it makes everyone special. No special skills to learn to be patient and kind. There's no special skills to learn how to tell the truth, but it makes everyone feel special in their lives. And it only requires, I thought, a willingness to grow and to learn a better way. And that's what Paul is trying to reiterate. Here's what Paul says in Galatians. It's kind of some verses around. Last week we talked about the fruit of the Spirit. Here's what he says in a paragraph before that. He writes to the Galatians, he says, "For you have been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters. But don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. For the whole law can be summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. But if you're always biting and devouring one another, watch out. Beware of destroying one another." And he says a couple paragraphs later, he writes this. He says, "Those who belong to Christ Jesus have nailed their passions." That means their old way of life, their desires, an old way of understanding love. They've nailed those passions and desires of their sinful nature to the cross. And they've been crucified there with Christ. He says, "Since we are living by the Spirit, let us follow the Spirit's leading in every part of our lives. Let us not become conceited or provoke one another or be jealous of one another." Now, because Paul knew love was the best description of who God was, it was the best description of who Jesus Christ is and what He does in our lives. Let's pray together. And if you're here this morning as you pray, and maybe you're searching, maybe you're looking for something, you could easily be here and feel kind of lost. Maybe you feel like you're at the end of your rope. I don't know what else to do. Things haven't worked out well. You might be very successful in the eyes of people around you or in the world, and you realize, yeah, but it's just not satisfying enough. There's still something missing in my life, something deeper, something that matters, something that has, some sort of eternal characteristics and quality about it. And you're looking for answers. The good news is that God sent Jesus Christ into this world to give us those answers. Just as Jesus changed Paul's life, the entire direction of his life, as he began to understand just how much God loved him when He sent His Son Jesus for him. Jesus is the way. He's the answer that we're looking for to the life that we really want to live, and yes, to the relationships that we want. And that if we were honest, we would say, I wouldn't mind paying a price to getting something that's going to last, that is more meaningful. And God provides a way for us to learn patience and kindness. If you've never put your hope and your trust in Him, I encourage you right now. Say, Lord, I don't have all the answers. I haven't figured everything out. But I do recognize that you love me, that you have plans for me, that you want good things for me. And I do realize that that relationship cannot grow unless I put my trust in you. So, Lord, forgive me for living a different way, for being self-centered and missing what you had for me. And Lord Jesus, come live in my heart. Bring me a new spirit, a new kind of life. In Jesus' name I pray.